here. We're so honored to have you. I'm even more honored to have Roxanne Reed back again, one of our staunch supporters and a really quality person that I believe once you get to know, you'll be happy for getting to know Roxanne, and that could create who knows what kind of opportunities. With that said, chat's open. We depend on you to help us direct our thoughts and conversations so we can be more relevant and in the now with you. Hopefully, get as many valuable transformational takeaways as possible today. And our key word today is identity. A very important word. With that, chat's open, and I'll turn it over to Roxanne to kind of give you a little bit of update as to where she is and what she thinks of identity.
Thank you so much, Don. It's always a pleasure to be able to spend time with you. And I feel so blessed to be part of this group and to be invited to speak and to present to the many listeners and viewers that you have and your connections. Um, my husband asked me last night, a little bit more about what I was going to talk about and just the group at large. And, if you had told me a year ago that this was important to me and that this group was important to me, I would have said it in a general sense. Of course, it's important. But I have to say, and maybe I might even get emotional, I'll try not to, but I do feel myself tearing up, that to have a place to be where where as a group that it's warming, it's welcoming, and it's positive. Because when you're a soulpreneur and you're out there and you're working every day, and I work from home, and I think that a lot of soulpreneurs do work from their home or with a very, at least at the most, a very small group of people. You know, you don't have that opportunity to be in a professional group like this and to be able to come and hear positive reinforcement. It's important, and I would not have felt that way if I hadn't been on this soulpreneur journey, which is what I started, since COVID. So for myself, I'm a business broker and I'm a business financer. I help people buy businesses and I help people sell. But one of the ways I do that is help people get the money to buy those businesses. And you know, it's uh, it's work that is done behind the scenes, and you're alone a lot, and the connections that you have maybe one at a time, but it's not a group setting. So it is such a pleasure for me to be here. And I will say something else, what I said to my husband last night, the way I see social media and LinkedIn in particular, I see LinkedIn as being the largest, the biggest, the funnest, if that's a word, the most fun, but the funnest um, dinner party that you can go to.
Mm-hmm.
And there are conversations happening amongst millions of people. And you're invited to those conversations by being on the platform. And you can walk up and go and pop into those conversations and add value or add insights to those conversations, and you're welcome to do so. um, and by doing that, you build relationships. And where else are you going to be able to do that? Like, I'm not going to be invited to a dinner party in Japan. Charles is in Japan. I'm not going to be able to pop into a dinner party. It's midnight for him right now, and it's lunchtime for me. So wherever you're listening, you can be part of that conversation from around the world. So thank you, Dawn.
Oh no, that was great. And I know it is heartfelt and meaningful, and that's what's so gratifying about this show is people start out happier, a little bit more inclined to be more vulnerable, more sharing, and that allows you to be more, it allows more learning and growing, because 30, 40 people sharing knowledge every day is 30, 40 days of experience and insight. And most of us are here because we're like minded, whether it's LinkedIn, whether it's the subject matter, whether it's the community. I mean, this is so multidimensional that it's not just one size fits all. It's whatever you need that day with the people around you who are willing and motivated to help support others, to help support themselves, and then support, bigger groups. Leslie's here. Leslie has been extremely active in the last few weeks since she's engaged a group. Welcome, Leslie, from North Carolina. Omar, who was on the other day um, with Rita, who did a great job. Hello, Roxanne and Don. Good morning. Leslie comes back with, I can't find Roxanne on LinkedIn. Don, would you mind dropping her? Thank you. I already put it in comments. So if you go to the post and actually go to my profile, go to the post, the comments there, it won't let you put like URLs in the messages, at least from my side. So, but it's there. And it's Roxanne Reed. It really comes up all the time. So, and you can reach out to Roxanne, or Roxanne will put her URL in there. Good morning, Leslie. Nice to see you. It's nice to have friends within friends. Daily energy booster shot. That's the way. Kim is here, and Kim will be here for the first time with Kelly tomorrow. So tune in and see Kim. Greetings, everyone. I hope your Wednesday is wonderful. Thanks for being here, Don and Roxanne. Well, it's all because of you. Kim, hello. Nice to meet more people. So, going to the topic of the day, which is identity. Identity can be seen as many different things. Typically, it's, who you are. And in most cases, it's the superficial who you are. Like, where do you live? How old are you? Where'd you go to school? But, when you take it inside through self-reflection and you ask yourself, who are you really? Being honest and straight with yourself. And then compare that to who do you really think you should be or want to be? Right? And if you take account and say, man, I'm everything I ever wanted to be, you're there. Sometimes, I used to know in the retail, when somebody says, okay, I want to buy it, you just take them to the register, and if you don't, then all of a sudden you bring something up and then, oh, I didn't know that. I got to think about that. Let me compare that. Oh, I got to go home now. Right? So, people keep adding when they're already there, when they should be now engaging with other people with where they're at to see how we can now grow bigger. Lillian's here. Great lady. I believe I reached out to set up a Zoom. I tried to talk to everybody who's in the audience just to get to know them and also get to learn from them. Hello, Wednesday, Kim. And this whole thing is about sharing. I know we'll get like 120 comments, but it'll come from like 8 or 9 people. And that's great because they're continuing their train of thought and their conversation with others. But look at what we could all do if we extended our arms to our networks. If this is good for you, it's good for people like you, and you should be the bearer of good news or information that's hard to find on LinkedIn, and that makes you a more valuable connection to people, is turning them on to things that are worthwhile. Dean's here. Wonderful guy, Dean. Love to have Dean on the show. I believe I reached out with a Zoom invitation there. So again, my thoughts with identity is really the whole you, the present you, the best you. And what's your thoughts on that, Roxanne?
Going back to what you said, identity starts with our names, and we've got Leslie who's trying to find me. So we'll help you. We'll help you find me, Leslie. And to do that, you can simply if the name is highlighted in Dawn's post, it's a direct link to that person. So anybody that's blue in his comments or anybody that's blue in his post, that is a direct link. So just simply click on that. It'll take you right to that person, whether it's me or whether it's Kelly or somebody else that Dawn has in his comments or anywhere in his post. And if that fails, then I'll find you.
Yeah, you're going to be found one way or the other.
Exactly. The hunt is on. So when it comes to identity, it's a big topic, and there's so many different ways that this conversation could go. But I wanted to bring it forward when we first talked about this, and it's been really a month ago that we talked about it, and we put out a topic. I said, well, let's talk about identity, because I know for myself that I have struggled with my identity in my lifetime, and I think that we all do. And that maybe I'm wrong, and maybe the our participants, our audience, and the feedback will tell me that I'm wrong. But I think that it's a part of the human condition, and it can start with your name. It can start with your height. It can start with your weight. It can start with your what side of the tracks that you were born on. I mean, there's so many things that we can talk about when it comes to our identity. But the biggest thing that what we learn in time is that we control that. We control how we see ourselves. And we may not necessarily be able to control how other people see us, because they may be looking at us through their own lens. A friend of mine made a post today, and he had been in the opinion and in the views of society grossly obese, and he lost half of his body weight. It took him 5 years to do it, and bariatric surgery. But there was a time when people were calling him baby elephant and were making fun of him, and that's very hurtful, and it's very damaging. And he realized for himself that he wanted to make changes for his own reasons. So he has. And 5 years later, he's half of his body weight and now competing in marathons. So it's one thing to have things said about us, and it's another thing for people to see us from their own lens. But it really comes down to how we see ourselves. Because if it had only been what other people saw and spoke to him, that's not enough to change. The change has to come from within, and how you see yourself has to come from within you ultimately to make changes. And I'm not saying that we're striving for perfection at all, ever. We're striving to be our best, and that is something that changes and evolves as we grow, we mature, we learn, we develop, we have new experiences. We're not meant to go through life, one and done. We're not meant to be just by ourselves. And evolution, as far as development goes, is critical. And I don't know if I lost Don here I lost him on the screen. I don't know if his network went down or not. So I'll read. Leslie says that Maxwell Maltz's cybernetics explains that even with an outer change to how we look, as Roxanne, it's an inside job, and which is what I would just, we agree on that. It's something that we have to take care of internally. Leslie also is saying that we control with how we think about ourselves. And I agree. It comes down to how we see ourselves. And going back to the earlier conversation when John and I were talking about identity, and I mentioned that I struggled with identity through my lifetime. I'm a child. I was of the 60s. I was born in the 60s. I was a teenager in the 70s. And, in the 80s, I was a young woman. And by the 90s, I was having children.
Okay, here we go.
And there we go. I thought we lost you, Don, but we kept the conversation going.
Yeah, something happened, and And basically, it's still happening. Yeah, no, we're good. I just have an echo, so why don't you talk for a little bit, Roxanne?
All right. Well, if we lose you again, we'll just keep talking, Don.
Okay.
But I was just saying that, as I was a divorce age child, and I was identified as a divorce age child. And there were people who, I mean, those are terms that you don't hear anymore. Those are terms that happened in the 60s and 70s and maybe in the 80s a little bit. But I was defined, I was identified socially as a divorce age child. And there were people in our community who didn't want their children to play with me. And because I was a divorce age child. Now, I could have gone through my lifetime having that be a stigma and holding on to that, but that wasn't who I was. I wasn't a divorcee, at 7 years old. I was a kid. So I didn't internalize that. But I will tell you that both of my brother and sister did. And they were a little older, and maybe it was a little bit of age. I don't know. But they did internalize that. And, I was raised in the US, in Maine specifically. So I had that Yankee twang. And sometimes if when I'm tired, it will still come out. I have to stop and think about how I say words with long A's in it. When I go to say skating, I want to say skating, and Bangor, and maybe it's not as bad as Boston, but I had that Yankee twang. And when my mother remarried, we came back to Canada. Now, I was born Canadian. I was only 13 months old when my parents moved to the US and my dad was working. But I was 6 turning 7 when we came back. So here I am, Yankee twang, and talking differently, moving to the country, had been living in town, raised on biking to the local pool, going to the local library, and all of a sudden now the local pool is the river flowing down the road and talking funny on top of it. So there was lots of opportunities as a kid to be teased and to be bullied. And I'll be honest, I was the one who was standing up for my brother and sister and stepping in and saying, no, we're not accepting that. You're not gonna treat us that way, and you're not going to beat us up, sort of thing. So go ahead.
Well, what's so interesting is everybody has a story, and very few people know that story when they first get to know that person. And you always think you're the one, not knowing everyone else is pretty much like you, in that they deal with their situations all the time. And getting back to identity, it's really knowing who you are, believing who you are, and that will give you some level of strength when you deal with people who tell you you're not or you're something else. And in this day and age, people are getting bombarded by all kinds of different messages from all kinds of different people who can be very manipulative. The good thing about growing up when I grew up is you had to be with people to be with people. There was no internet. I mean, you could, and even the telephone was not something you used like you use today. So yeah, when you got to see people, be with people, it made it easier to appreciate people. And when people are hiding behind a mask or hiding behind a screen, that makes it more challenging, but it also makes it more worthwhile to identify, let's say, your community family that's already pre-vetted and known. And that gives you the luxury of not having to worry about who is this, what are they about, what do I have to be aware of? And that's where true collaboration comes in, is when you have trust And when you enjoy the person, and you find things in people that you want to learn from, differences are opportunities to
Exactly.
build, to build,
Exactly. Well said.
you know,
Well said.
here's Leslie. Now it's don't play with them. Their parents are Republicans or Democrats, depending. There's so much misinterpretation. That's
Now, are you going to be able to read that,
I
Donald?
understand
No, or
that.
do I need to read that one for
Okay,
you? You got to pop the card, have a square.
well, and that's, I think, an important part of identity is to mix some humor into who you are, bring some laughter to wherever you go. A smile goes a long way towards warming people up and making them smile. So you are the proactive agent of what you want to happen if you really direct yourself and continue consistently to be who you say you are and show up. What's your thoughts on that, Roxanne?
You know, we are the agent. We are the ones, and I can say that being a divorcee child was something I was aware of. It didn't. I don't feel that it affected me the way that did my brother and sister. But interestingly enough, just for full disclosure, for myself, I come from a family. My mother is Acadian, French Acadian. So think about your Cajuns in Louisiana. Those are the family members that got deported back in the 1700s from here in Eastern Canada. Um, so the women in my family tend to be under 5 feet tall. They're 4'8", they're 4'6". If they're 4'11", they're tall. And I show up at 5'7". So my whole life, all I heard was how big you are. Oh, look how big Roxanne is. Look how big. I kept hearing the word big, big, big. Now, I remember being a young teenager, being at that point 5'5" and weighing 103 pounds. As an adult, I look back at that. I'm thinking that kid was not big. That kid was healthy, a healthy child. But that's not how I internalized it. So I have struggled in my lifetime with my self-image and my self-identity and my weight. And quite frankly, I'm the heaviest right now that I have ever been in my life. And it has it has influenced my desire to be public and my desire to be live. Um, you were asking for a long time, Roxanne, come on,
Mhm.
share. And I didn't want to because of how I looked. And a year ago, I had professional photos taken. I didn't want to go. I knew I needed them, but I actually, the morning of that session, I would have canceled on her if she hadn't charged me and was going to charge me anyhow, because I didn't want to present myself that way. I wanted to wait until I had lost 20, 30, 50 pounds. And if I can say that, I'm still in the middle of this heaviness. And for myself, I do want to do this. And I've started making the daily changes and the incremental changes. Uh, but if I had waited to do these live shows, if I had waited for my professional photos, I wouldn't be where I already am.
Mm-hmm.
Now, am I where I'm going to be? No, but I'm further ahead than where I was a year ago.
Yeah, and I think progress is all you can hope for is, to be realistic and to be pragmatic. Little changes over time make a difference. And then really one has to look at, again, the definition of one's identity is in the beginning, because all people see is the only things they can see, which is the outside, right? But when you find your real value and beauty is on what you think and feel and how you can share it, right? Everything else becomes a vessel. And, everybody, no matter how old you are or who you are, is only as relevant as the next words that come out of your mouth, right? Because when you say something no one understands or believes, you're pretty much out of the game. But if you can stay relevant, if you could stay
Right.
valuable, because people are typically against other people and for themselves. That's typically the way human nature is I need to go out and get something, I need something, and somehow I'm going to get it, right? So when you're more into relationship building instead of transactional situations, and you really take the time to get to know somebody. I mean, I know in Roxanne's business, she has to gather a lot of information, right, to make a decision. If you're going to qualify for a loan or a business, you're going to have to furnish a lot of data, tax stuff, accounting stuff, whatever it is, because that's how it is. Well, when you're sharing yourself, you've got to show your best numbers, the real numbers, the ones that won't get you in trouble, but the ones who can create opportunities. And if you look at that and you say, what's my number one asset, right? I mean, instead of a bank account, you may say, well, I'm really generous and giving. That's my nature. Or I'm very intelligent and I love helping people, educating people, sharing with people, or I'm a lifelong learner. Once that becomes your identity, anybody who's wasting their time looking at something that's typical or usual, but the deeper you get with anything, especially like with this show, the richer it becomes. The more beautiful it appears, and the more loving it starts to become. So those are the things you want to be accepted into. Someone who's prejudiced, someone who's discriminatory, someone who's exclusive instead of inclusive, it's got a million reasons before you even get there why you're not going to work, right? You didn't even have a chance. I mean, and that's why we were talking before the show. Everybody just needs to have a shift to start becoming the master of their own future, right? To tell people, here's what I need, here's who I am, here's what I'm willing to give. And now you're talking to thousands of people versus one person competing with thousands of people next to him for that one door to the one person who might look at their resume or their application and then take that as judgment versus an unfair situation to begin with. And before, no one had another way in. Before, there were very few doors, and that was it. And now all of a sudden, there's your own door with something like a LinkedIn Live, with something like getting on the show. And sometimes you're your worst enemy when you decide what other people want or don't want about you. But then it says that you're also open about anybody who wants you, right? Versus who deserves you. If you believe in the value you bring, in the value you are, you wouldn't take a $20,000 car and someone says, I'll give you $300 and say, good, let's do it. You would know what the value is and you would want to exchange it for something of equal or greater value. And I think when you can appreciate yourself, everybody starts to feel your confidence. They say success is an attitude, and once you got that attitude of you're going to win, it may take a while. You might have to learn a lot. You might, but if you're committed and persistent, people love winners. All that other stuff goes away. And, I'll tell you one thing about losing. And anybody who plays is not a loser. They're just practicing to be a winner until they win, I guess. But, the thing is how you feel about yourself projects to a lot of other people.
Exactly. That's exactly it, Dawn. It comes down to your inner self. And it really doesn't matter. I was reading something from Arnold Schwarzenegger just a couple of days ago. I mean, and if anybody, I mean, look at the things he's done. He's come from a foreign country, and he's, been Mr. Universe, and he's, been the governor of California, and movies and what have you. And, there's a lot of people who would look at somebody like that and say, you know, they don't belong, or, they don't, they can't do that. And, he's saying that, while they're busy saying that, he's busy doing it. And I've just been reading some of the comments as they were happening, as you were talking, and reading some of the comments. And there's some questions raised around identity when it comes to relationships, whether it's being a spouse, a partner, or whether it's being a parent. And I want to correct something that I said earlier, um, because I am self-aware, and I realized something as I was reading some of those comments. I was saying that my parents' divorce as a child didn't affect me the way that it did my brother and sister. And it didn't affect me in the same way, but it did affect me, because the realization is that when I got married, and I married young, um, I was determined that divorce was not going to be part of my future and part of my relationship. I came from a family with a history of divorce. My grandmother had actually been divorced twice, again, back when it wasn't popular. And then my mom had divorced, and I was determined I wasn't going to be divorced. So going into my marriage at a very early age in a community that was very religious, and with that, all of the good and the bad, um, in my marriage, I did lose myself. I did lose my identity. And it came to a point where I was in my early 30s. So at that point, I've been married for quite a few years, well, over 10 years. And my mother looked at me. She said, "Roxanne, you don't laugh anymore." And my response to her was, "Well, of course not. I'm not the child that I was, when I lived at home. I'm a mother, and I have responsibilities, and I'm a wife, and I have an important and busy job. And, I of course I'm not going to be the silly girl that I was, that you raised." And she quietly looked at me and said, "You don't laugh anymore." And I have to admit, at the time, I was taken aback and a little like, "Well, what do you mean by that?" And that began to work in my soul and in my psyche and in my mind. And it's something I've never forgotten. So, yeah, there was a time where, because I married into a family of good standing in the community, which I didn't have. I married into a family that was respectable, and that was something I didn't have. I mean, the family that my mother married into was perfectly respectable, but I wasn't seen as perfectly respectable in that community. So to move to another community and marry into a respectable family, that gave me a new social standing, and I wanted to maintain that, and I wanted to keep it. I wanted to hold on to it. And in doing so, I am going to be emotional. Um, it really was at any cost. And I constantly adjusted and adjusted and adjusted my behavior to what I thought was right and what I thought was socially acceptable and pleasing to my husband. And not to dish him, because we're still together 40 years later, but he kept taking. And the more that I gave, the more he wanted. There was never, I never hit that enough mark for him. So, and through counseling, we have worked through those issues. I mean, this is going back, 25 years ago, out of a 40-year marriage. And we had to find our own places in that relationship, and realizing that it was our relationship. It wasn't to be defined by his parents. It wasn't to be defined by my parents. It wasn't to be defined by our church. It wasn't to be defined by our friends, because my friends were telling me to leave them, flat up, move on, Roxanne. And one of my friends and personal mentors, even told me that she felt that my husband had a character flaw, and that there was no saving that relationship. But one of the things I decided before I was ever married was that I wasn't going to be nitpicky. I wasn't going to tear him down or tear him apart. That it was about me. And that when I got perfection in my own life, that's when I'd start demanding perfection from somebody else. Mm-hmm. To this day, I'm 60 years old. I haven't reached to perfection, so I'm not looking for it from anybody else either. But it allowed me to give him and myself first, grace, forgiveness, and the room to look at this relationship and make new choices. Now, for myself, we chose to continue that relationship and to develop that relationship. And for us, it was the right decision. And I would never say that it was to be that way for everybody, because it's a personal choice. So I hope that answered.
No, it covered a lot of ground, and I think it was valuable to so many people who can align with that, either because of their experience or because of now viewing their experience differently through someone else's experience and eyes. And, we got quite a bit of attention and interaction because it was so sincere and heartfelt. And I want to take the opportunity to compliment your hat. I know that we didn't have a chance to see it, but let's go through some of these wonderful people. I'll just start here. Disillusion of a 30-year marriage had me realize we're bound as one identity. It took me years to get back to my own self, years. And everybody's journey is everybody's journey. Hi, everyone from Ambambola. To Ambambola is just a wonderful individual who shows up pretty much every day and shares the message of what we're trying to communicate here. Lillian knows Ambambola. Kim, I definitely believe we can lose ourselves in marriage and relationships, parenting too. Hello, Lillian. Kim, who is going to be here tomorrow with Kelly. Leslie Flowers, makes sense. I can understand how this happens. Dr. Joanne is here. She's going to be here Saturday for the first time. Excited to have her on board. This is attracting so many wonderful people who have so much wisdom, experience, and generosity to share that, it makes it all worthwhile. Glad you're here. I'm glad everybody's here. Very true. I believe we constantly grow and evolve. Thank you, Kim. You are amazing, sis. Dr. Joanne says, yes, we do. Dennis is here. Dennis is always full of rhymes and interesting comments. Need is more important than want. Use your own door and be adorable and valuable. So true, Dennis. I said Dean, but it's Dennis. I caught myself. Linda, been listening, friends. We each have to take step forward. Standing idle is an holding pattern. We had that for a time with Scare for Health ruling our movement. and his blessing. When God helps you find fuel to make steps forward, and how people saw me. This touches a nerve in so many people identity, because everybody's constantly either searching for it, or trying to build on it. But listening friends, we took that one. Pauline, who's a wonderful lady, inclusively should be non-negotiable and a no-brainer. We should take everyone as they are and where they are. From that point, through listening and acceptance, determine how you can make a positive impression. We as individuals have multiple identities. That's so true. You will show up for different people in different ways. Losing yourself in relationship is easy to accomplish. However, regaining your identity is not as easy. So true, because things happen over time and they take time to get back. That's exactly where I am. Being a widow, it is difficult, uh, Lillian says. Leslie, lots of love. Who doesn't have a character flaw? Kim says, Lillian, how I can truly understand is a process to get back to our center of self-love. I am still on the journey. Dr. Joanne follows up, so important to offer yourself grace and forgiveness, Roxanne. I'm not sure that perfection exists in this human form. Thankful for you and sharing. Well, that's so sweet. And Dr. Joanne, somebody you should tune into Saturday. Your story resonates with me, Roxanne. And one person's story becomes so much a part of everybody else's story, and can help them guide, or at least see things in a better way, in something that will eventually, hopefully, turn out even better for the time and effort that people have to put into things. It's been 12 years, but I was a wife and still mom of 3, but I need to know my identity back. Kim says, Roxanne, you have shared so many great insights and feelings. Thank you. Thank you for your support and invitation for tomorrow's show. I appreciate all that you say every day. Well, if it wasn't for the audience, the show would really come up a little bit less, maybe a lot less. Jumping off to meet brother for lunch, must depart for lunch with my brother. Leslie, great to have you anytime you decide to be here, and look forward to having you back on the show. Roxanne had me crying for a minute. Well, thank you, Lillian. That's so thoughtful of you. I had to rebuild me after being put down in my marriage, as it isn't easy, and having 3 children relying on me took important decisions, but can say working to find me and still growing. This group helps us all look at our lives and pass possible. Dennis, Leslie said, Dennis, interesting. I see want as the most valuable. I know I'll do what is needed. I focus on what I want and why. Your thoughts? I could be out of context with you, however. And then Leslie says, salt and Boca lime. Okay. Well, Leslie's off to lunch. Enjoy. It's 2 hours earlier here, so it's almost after breakfast. Isn't this fun, Roxanne? How so much of this is like just so supportive?
Oh, it is. And I'm not used to being vulnerable. And maybe some are more comfortable than others. For me, it has always been very uncomfortable. I've always been the one to just keep a stiff upper lip and say it could be worse. And I do believe in positivity. I have lived that. I made that as a choice a long time ago. But it's okay to it's okay to it took me time to learn to acknowledge my own feelings, because they I didn't see them as being relevant. What needed to be done still needed to be done, and life had to go on. And as some of the women and some of the participants are sharing, you still have children to take care of. You still have your job you got to go to, and there's little time and space to for that level of honesty, and for that level of self-reflection, because there are busy times in our lives. And when your children are young, and your career is starting out, those are very busy times in a person's life. um, I will share this story just because it may help someone. Who knows? But for myself, I was always the giver. As I say, keep the upper lip and be the giver. So even at work, I was the giver. And one particular event, and this is where I'm getting to, is that I was at work at the time. I was working in a publishing company, and we put out weekly newspapers and periodicals and monthlies and quarterlies, and it was a print and publishing company. And I was in the advertising, marketing, promotions department, and we had a massive snowstorm. I really shouldn't have driven into work that day because I was living a good 40 minutes away, because the snow was up to my knees and still coming down. But I had this little tank of a car that would drive through anything, a little Dodge Omni. It wasn't pretty, but it was a tank. So I get to work, and my boss and his wife were in Florida visiting their children. And I was overseeing that marketing department, advertising department. And it was publication day. So the paper was being put to bed and getting ready to go to print. So I thought everything was done. And I left and went out, was doing calls, because it was a good time to visit clients, because nobody was in town shopping, because nobody could get around and get going. So it was a really good time. You could have some deep conversations and really develop relationships. So I took advantage of it. And when I came back in a couple of hours later, my hair was dripping wet. I was covered with snow. I was cold, and it was getting close to lunchtime. I was hungry. And one of the production people come up to me and said, while you were out, we lost power, and we lost, we had just switched over from the old papers being put up on the boards, literally physically on the boards, and then being put together right on the 21.5 by 13 sheets, and they had gone digital. Well, they had lost the digital technology, so they had to revert back over. Luckily, the boards were all still there. Everything was still there because it had only been a week or so. And he said we had to put the paper together manually, and when we did, we missed a whole section of ads. And these were weekly recurring ads. They were called TFNs, UFNs, till further notice, until further notice, whatever you wanted to call them. But it was a chunk of revenue dollars. And he said, and you weren't here, and we didn't know where they were. We didn't know where to find them, blah, blah, blah. He said, but if you want them in this week's paper, if you beg me, I'll put them in. Well, Dawn, that was not the day. Or maybe it was the day. I don't know. All I know was my response was, he's still talking. I don't know what else he said, but that word beg went ping, 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 ping in my brain. And all I heard was beg, 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 beg. And right then and there, something changed in my heart and in my mind. And I've never been the same since. And I looked at him and I said, if you can't put those ads in the paper, I understand. I will contact these advertisers and let them know what happened. But if you won't put those ads in the paper, those ads are on your head. Mm-hmm. I walked away. I walked over, picked up the phone, called the publishers, told them what happened. And I said, and you need to know that right now, I am leaving for the rest of the day. Picked up the phone, called down to a hairdresser, and I knew that she had cancellations because the whole day was going to be canceled because of the snow. I said, Carol, I want to come and get my hair done. She says, come on down, Roxanne. Walked in, sat down. She said, what do you want done? I said, how about blonde? Because my natural hair, I'm telling stories at a school now, but my natural hair is as dark as my eyebrows. I'm a natural brunette. And that day I went blonde. I drove home, got my hair cut, went blonde, drove home. My husband was like, whoa, I love it. I said, well, that's good. I'm glad you do. I did it for you as a favor, because when you look at me, you need to know I've changed.
Well, it's so funny that it just takes a word or a mention at the right time to really uh, be the thing that gets you off of center and gets you moving in the right direction. And that's why everybody has a story. Andrea is here. Well, let me go back. These things come in pretty fast and furious. Okay, so Andrea's here, loves the hat. We've got Kim here, Lillian, one day at a time. I'm here for your partner. And it's good to know there are people who are sincerely here for you and vice versa. Harvey's here, who will be on Friday with Christy. Sorry I'm late, was buying a hat. You got a sense of humor too. Andrea is laughing. Um, Kim, Lillian Howard, Tears Water, the beautiful garden of our souls. And that's if you can look at things from different ways, you can feel different things from the way you look at different things. Mother Teresa, be honest and transparent will make you vulnerable, but do it anyway. And she is right. You open your heart. Kim is, I thought you were still celebrating your birthday. Yeah, yesterday was his birthday. We actually sang to him.
Well, it's actually today. He's milking this.
Okay. Well, maybe, who would know? Maybe I should get another birthday. I am with the phrase stiff upper lip until I met my wife and the coming on here. I was very reserved, my emotions, not anymore. Yeah, freedom is really so powerful and so valuable once you allow yourself the freedom you always had and never took full advantage of. And once you tell your story, it's been told, right? And when people accept you and still love you, you can now work on everything else and not you're concerned with what will they think if they knew or am I able to hide my true self? I mean, it's easier when you're honest. As a result of my botched marriage, I lost my humor and many things. But now I love my life and look forward to better days. And if everybody can look at where they're at as part of the journey to where they're going to go and not to where they're finally going to stay, as long as you keep moving, you're never where you were, right? And that way you don't have to feel like you're stuck. For me, it's scary. Yeah, it's easy to say, but it's not always easy to live. So, that there's a big difference. Harvey's Lillian, yes, at first you get used to it and changes your life to a better place. Charles is here. I can't thank Charles enough. He always comes whenever he can. And it's like midnight over there. Charles, you're an amazing gentleman. And, I'm so proud of all these people where, in the past, gentlemen and ladies were what people used to introduce people as, and we've got so many wonderful ladies and so many cool gentlemen here that brings back a lot of the value that everybody took for granted. A powerful story, Roxanne. Love it sometimes. A moment needs physical thing to remind us of that. Lillian, Charles Caldwell. Well, gosh, for almost the hour being up, Roxanne, it goes so quick when you're sharing so many wonderful stories. What's your thoughts now?
I find it goes fast every day. I'm a listener every day that I'm not on here, and I'm listening more than I'm on. I just find it goes so quickly. It starts out, gets the conversation going, and it really is. This group is so unique in that people. Oh, I'm like the king of two birthdays today. Yeah, on the wrong. poor Harvey. Harvey, do you know what day your birthday is? No, just teasing. No, the time does go quickly, and that to me it just speaks to the quality of the and the level of interaction this group has, and I'm just so honored to be here, and it's such a privilege to well, it's such a privilege to be able to tell my story. A year ago, this past year has been a lot. A year ago, this time, I had no voice. I lost my voice, literally. I couldn't even whisper and be heard. And that was over 3 weeks. And I lost my voice again at a later in the year as well. And when you don't have a voice, literally, whether that is physically or whether it is emotionally. Um, Being able to speak again, you realize the importance. And some of the things that we've been talking about here, about relationships and the changes that many are saying, there is a time in that storyline where you don't feel you have a voice. And I spent a lot of part of my life not being heard and not feeling that I could speak up. And I was not at risk of physical abuse, but I was being controlled. And it wasn't that my husband is a bad person. He was as much a product of his upbringing as that I'm a product of mine. And by trying to live your life by some outside social norm and context, we can interpret that as a need to control in order to make it happen and how we see it. And we don't have time to go into that in the last 3 or 4 minutes, but 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 I will just say that let's not be our own worst enemy. Regardless of how we identify, let's not be our own worst enemy, Dawn. You know, let us love ourselves. Let us be the ones who wake up in the morning and say it's a good day, you know, and I can be happy today. And that's why this show to me is so important, because throughout our day, throughout our week, throughout our month, or things that come back to us, triggers, whatever it is, that the positivity that we have in this group is needed. And people are lonely, and we need to connect, and we need to connect positively. There's enough negativity in the world. We can find it on every page, on every news outlet. We can find negativity. It's not hard to find. But positivity, that's something that is a little harder. And I don't know what the number is. I'll just throw out a number, but I remember reading it a long time ago that for every one positive thing that we hear 8,000 negative things. It's a ridiculously disproportionate. So if there are 120 positive comments on this feed today, and another 100 tomorrow, and another 100 the next day, that's a good start in changing people's mindsets.
Yeah, I believe it. And that's why I'm so encouraged and gratified, because not only that, but everybody's sitting on a network of connections that is positioned to communicate and to share and to expand. So it's really more people taking the initiative, being proactive. With that, let's share last comments. Harvey Tuck says, hello, Lillian. Hope you're good. Charles came back with a meaty comment. Identity, we are not our jobs, we are not our cars, we are not our watches, we are not our houses, our neighbors' houses. We are what's in the heart. And that's so true, because everything you mentioned before will come and will go. Every job you have will not be there forever. Every car will be replaced. Every watch could be. Same thing with houses, but it's who you are. And I think, to address Roxanne's point, while people are learning and growing and changing and not being what they are today back then, which makes sense because hopefully everybody's evolved, the person they were with was learning and changing and didn't know much themselves, right? So, everybody's pretty much in the same place, but they see it differently and they see themselves differently in it until someone actually can share a mirror with them of honest eyes, honest ears, new look at something, and no skin in the game. And this is what this group has: is it's together, but no one has a previous obligation. No one has to make up for the past. No one has to change something just to be right today. And, the other thing is there are no absolutes. If you're having an awful day, I guarantee you during that day, there were some wonderful, beautiful things that you were exposed to. You may not have been aware of, you may not have taken the time to appreciate it, but there's so many sounds, to Roxanne's point, losing your voice. You don't know what you have until you don't have it. And then you find out what it was for the people who never had it, to look outside and say, I used to be there or wished I could be with that group. And now I'm not, whether you're married, divorced, lost a job, lost your money, lost your health, those things are going to happen. And they do happen. And they happen to everybody in different ways at different times. The key is, like that saying says, it's not how many times you fall down, it's how fast you get up. You're going to fall down, just don't stay down. With that, great comment, Charles. I can't speak enough about Charles. We could have a program just with the name Charles on it. Paul was saying the same yesterday about the voice. Your voice is you. Your voice is your outlet to share who you are. And if people don't know you enough and don't appreciate you enough, it's up to you to speak a little louder to more people. Get the word out. Don't take a poll of one and decide that's what your future is going to be, just because one person said yes or no. And you can change, and know that even if you don't know how to at this point or when it's going to happen, you can. And knowing you can gives you hope. We are not our mistakes. We're not our failures. We're not our relationships. We're not our marriages. We are what's in the heart. And repeat that to yourself, right? Because too many people get lost in materialism. And they never have the time or the attitude to fully enjoy it. To them, it's possessing, it's owning, it's showing, it's not really experiencing. Harvey says had to test out the hat in the sun. It worked well. Well, I'm going to buy stock in hat companies starting tomorrow. We need to have a LinkedIn comedy evening. You need to watch some Monty Python. Well, every way we can do whatever we can do, we're doing a little. I know Roxanne has touched so many people that we see today, but I also know how much that's going to touch people who will never meet or never know, who this will continue to ripple to and ripple from. And a lot of people are just on the bubble. If they can just get a little motivation, or someone says, if Roxanne can do it, I can do it. I'm not alone. And you've got a group here that's already got a tailwind for you when you get here. People are looking for ways to support, make people feel better, be compassionate, be empathetic. Where are you going to get that? And how long does it take to earn that? And how do you sustain that? And anything that's not sustainable is not healthy, right? So Andrea says, I'm not the only one getting emotional. Thank you so much for joining me, Roxanne. Andrea is here Tuesdays every week, tells a wonderful story because she's a wonderful person. And she enjoys seeing other people get the benefit. And your pain gets lessened as other people get to avoid some pain or reduce pain or the time they're in pain. Everything is a moment in time. And if you can persevere, look beyond, believe you have yet to learn everything you need to know and meet everybody you're going to know, and they could be the missing piece to fulfillment. Harvey, these comments, we may be here for a while. Sometimes it's a tiny moment that makes the difference. Yeah. Andrea, you go for it. Charles, Ambimo, you're not your botched marriage. You're not your lost sense of humor. You are what's in your heart, and your heart is good. And that's so true. Trust your heart. Your mind will mix you up every chance it gets. It's a lot of ego-driven stuff. It's a lot of me instead of we. And your heart really is where your true voice should come from. You know, you trust your feelings, you know, trust what you see, trust what you touch, trust who you're around. You know, the closer you get to yourself, the closer you get to other people who want to get close to you. Now the magic can happen, right? Now everybody's taking their armor off. Now everybody's learned everything there is to know about everybody. You know, and when I used to do turnarounds and restructurings, and I used to have to do creditor resolution meetings and all that stuff, I used to always start and say, this is an open kimono meeting, right? There's nothing left to the imagination. You know, and that's how it would start, because everybody just, you know, they were there to build trust or believe in trust. And I think once you can get to be an open kimono person, right, and after everybody sees whatever's there and they still love you for it, all of a sudden it becomes an asset. You know, it's almost like having a hat, right? It's a character personality that you can exemplify. And, you know, being different has its moments of fun, of being interesting. I mean, that's why they have costume parties. You know, there's so many people who love to dress up in things they wish they could be in real life, but for a moment in time. And, you know, another thing, and I think Harvey brought that today, and so many other people, is laughter. You know, not everybody's got to be a genius. Not everybody's got to be the smartest idea. Someone's just got to get somebody to go from sad to happy. What do they say? A smile is, you know, a frown is a smile upside down, you know, and how many muscles you really improve when you smile versus frowning. And there's evidence to all this. So anyways, we're 6 minutes over. Roxanne, we'll have one last word from Harvey. Don't want to go. Hope your evening is going well. Well, it's going to be breakfast pretty soon for the evening's gone. But thank you, everyone. Roxanne, last words, and then we'll give everybody a chance to get back to whatever they were doing before they met us.
Thank you.
Well, that's short, sweet, and to the point. And thank everybody. You know, I can't tell you how much this means to me, how much I love so much goodness and kindness and thoughtfulness that's being spread every day in every way. So with that, bye for now. Rest up. Come back in 23 hours. We'll have Kelly and Kim here, and we'll continue the conversation.